Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Uh, have you ever been on a date with somebody and were expected to pay, and then you open your wallet and boom, you have $20? No,
No.
no, never.
Situation.
Well, imagine you were in that situation and you don't leave a tip because you barely have $20. Now you have now you are facing two parties, one being your girl, another one being the waiter. The girl thinks you're broke, and the waiter also thinks you're broke. Well, hello, my name is Steven, and today I'll tell you more about that and why we should, or why restaurants should abolish tipping culture and just pay their employees livable wages. To introduce, I want to start off with a Cornell study that shows tipping is a result of many factors. Many factors affect tipping. Um, and the three main factors are income stability, workforce quality, and consumer transparency. Those three are the main things to me that stood out to me that affect tipping culture. First, I want to start explaining income stability more. Income stability is basically, to me, predictable pay. You want to have stable income. You don't want to depend on tipping culture. A NELP study, which is basically just a restaurant worker like workforce thing, basically did a study. About 50% of a waiter's salary is tip. So do you really want to like have 50% of your check? Maybe sometimes like, would you want to be missing 50% of your check just randomly? I don't think that'd be a good thing to have for you to be able to miss 50% of your check. Because I know I'd be mad if I got home and I was missing half of my check. Uh, yeah, basically the study just shows that server's salary is just half of it is depending on tip, and tip is depending on a bunch of other factors, and they can't control it. So they're just gambling half of their checks most of the time. And this demonstrates to me why tipping is not the best option for waiters. They should be paid livable wages because you don't want to go home one day and be missing half your check just because. You want to go home to a set salary. That's what income stability is. You have a set salary. I'd rather be paid a set amount and know what I'm gonna go to work for than just go and maybe I'll make more or maybe I'll make half my check and make nothing. That's why I think tipping culture should be abolished. But with that being said, my second point was workforce equality. Many times tipping is also based off race, gender, age, ethnicity. There's this an example in ABC 7 News where a waiter is Mexican and instead of a tip on the bill they wrote no tip for illegal, and that just shows how tipping is not really, it could not even be based off like the actual service, rather just something like his ethnicity. He was judged based off the fact of him being Mexican and not his service. So that that affects his wage. Obviously, you can go home and make less money, and that's just one instance. It can happen various times, but people won't say it. Like people can always just not tip because they believe something and never say it, and he'll just keep making less and less money based off of tips. He'll just keep making less and less money, which is another reason this demonstrates how tipping culture doesn't is not necessarily the best in food industry. They should be paid a local wage because an instant like that where he didn't get paid just because he was Mexican. And because this also demonstrates that his service was not bad, it was just his ethnicity and that's something he can't control. And even though he can't control his ethnicity can control his wage, if that makes sense. Like him being Mexican controlled him not being tipped, but him being Mexican also he can't control that. But if we were to pay them a livable wage, that could be controlled, and necessarily we wouldn't have to depend on tips, and an incident like that won't ever have to happen again. And my third and final point is customer transparency. as I said in the beginning, would you like to go out to eat and know what you're gonna pay for, and not just have an unexpected charge at the end? And a result in that is like many times if you don't tip, you'll get less service, if that makes sense. Like if you don't tip, the service is gonna be worse, obviously, and that affects both parties. It affects the customer because why would you be forced to tip to get a better service? And why would the waiter need? I mean, as we know earlier, 50% of his check, or about 50, is basically his whole thing. I would obviously be mad too if I didn't get paid 50% of my whole check. I would probably do the same thing they're doing and give worse service. And this, it like brings a problem because you either do one or the other. You can't really do both unless you really just set him with the pay, because the customer will come to the establishment and know what they're paying for, and so with the waiter, he'll go there and he'll know what his salary is. He won't depend on the customer, and the customer won't depend on the tip to receive better service. And this point really to me was the best because it really showed how tipping culture goes both ways, and it just doesn't affect just customer. It doesn't affect just waiters too. It affects everybody. That being said, my conclusion is that restaurants should abolish tipping culture and provide livable wages because they affect everybody, mainly waiters, and livable wage will solve most of these problems, as we saw how all these problems were a result of tipping culture. And I think most of them could be solved by just paying them a livable wage, by them knowing what they're going to get paid for, knowing what they signed up for. And yeah, one can say you don't have to work as a waiter. They could make more, they could make less, or as I would say, they could just make middle wage. Like they don't have to make $100 more. They don't have to make $0. They could just make a certain amount of money and just be set with that for the whole shift. That's why I believe restaurant should abolish tipping culture and pay waiters a livable wage. Thank you.